Zara had always considered herself a calm and composed individual, someone who thrived in social settings without losing control. But that night, everything felt different. The moment she stepped into the bustling city bar, the faint smell of liquor mixed with the hum of conversations, and the familiar faces of her friends. She was here to celebrate Aisha's birthday, an annual tradition that had kept them close for years, but as Zara walked through the crowd, her eyes caught something, a person from her past. Standing near the entrance, sipping a drink and scanning the room with a confidence she hadn't seen in years, was Tobi, Aisha's ex-boyfriend. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen him in months. Not since the messy breakup that left a trail of unresolved emotions and an awkward divide between the two of them. It wasn't that Zara had any lingering feelings for Tobi, far from it. But there was something unsettling about seeing him again, especially at a celebration that was supposed to be about Aisha, not the ghosts of her past. Zara tried to ignore him, keeping her distance as she joined Aisha at the center of the room. Aisha, the ever-vibrant hostess, was catching up with other friends, her laughter loud and infectious. Zara glanced over, trying to be subtle, but her eyes locked with Tobi's. His gaze was intense, almost probing, as though he was sizing her up, considering something. Zara turned quickly, pretending not to notice, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he had been watching her longer than she realized. "Zara. You made it." Aisha's voice broke through her thoughts as she wrapped her arms around her in a tight hug. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Zara replied, forcing a smile. She was already feeling the weight of the situation, unsure of how to handle the sudden tension Tobi's presence had caused. Later in the evening, as the party grew livelier, Zara found herself standing near the bar, nursing a drink. The music was loud, the laughter contagious, but her mind kept drifting back to Tobi. She couldn't help it. It was almost as though he was drawing her attention, even from across the room. He seemed so different now, more confident, more intent. A part of her wondered if his interest in her was genuine, or if it was just part of his need to prove something to himself after the breakup with Aisha. As Zara turned her back to the bar to leave, she nearly collided with Tobi. His presence was too close, his towering figure making her feel trapped for a moment. "Zara," he said smoothly, a smile creeping across his lips. "We need to talk." Her stomach tightened. Something about the way he said it, calm but persistent, sent an icy chill down her spine. Zara glanced around, hoping Aisha would come to her rescue, but the crowd had thickened. This conversation was going to happen, whether she liked it or not. "I don't think there's anything to talk about, Tobi," Zara replied firmly, trying to maintain her composure, but he wasn't deterred. His eyes narrowed, and his voice softened, as if to reel her in. "I think you'll change your mind soon enough." Zara's heart raced. This wasn't just an innocent conversation. It was a warning, one she wasn't sure she was ready to face. The next few days passed in a blur, but Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Tobi's presence at Aisha's birthday party had left an unsettling mark on her. She had hoped it was just a fleeting moment, a casual encounter between old acquaintances, but Tobi's behavior after that night proved otherwise. It started innocently enough. Zara received a message on her phone, the familiar tone breaking the silence of her morning routine. She reached for her phone, expecting a message from a friend or work-related notification. But instead, the message was from Tobi. "I'm still thinking about what we talked about. You and I, we have unfinished business." Zara stared at the text, her finger hovering over the screen. A chill ran through her. This was not what she had expected from their brief exchange. What unfinished business could he possibly mean? She had made it clear to him that she wasn't interested. She hadn't encouraged him, hadn't given him any reason to think she was open to anything beyond a polite greeting. And yet, here he was, reaching out again. She hesitated before replying, hoping to put an end to it once and for all. "Tobi, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not interested in starting anything with you. Please respect that." The reply came almost immediately. "I respect your wishes, but it's hard to ignore what we both know is there. Just think about it, Zara. We could be great together." Zara's heart skipped a beat. The message felt too personal, too insistent. She tried to ignore the uneasy feeling gnawing at her stomach and put her phone down. She had more important things to focus on, but Tobi's words lingered in the back of her mind. Over the next few days, the texts didn't stop. They grew more frequent, and the tone shifted. The initial polite persistence gave way to a more desperate edge, as if Tobi was trying to convince her, not just make conversation. He started asking where she was, what she was doing, and if they could meet up for a coffee or a walk. Every time, Zara found an excuse to avoid him. Then, one morning, as she entered her favorite cafe for a quick breakfast before work, she spotted him. Tobi was sitting at a table by the window, his eyes locking with hers the moment she walked through the door. Zara froze. Her heart raced as she debated whether to turn and leave. But before she could make a decision, he was already standing up, walking toward her with that confident stride that made her feel like she was the only one in the room. "Zara," he said, his smile warm, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made her uncomfortable. "I was hoping we'd run into each other. Can I join you for a drink?" Zara's mind raced. She wanted to refuse, to walk away, but she couldn't bring herself to be rude. "I am actually meeting someone," she lied, her voice trembling slightly. Tobi's smile didn't falter, but Zara noticed the way his eyes darkened. "Maybe another time then," he said softly, though there was something in his tone that made her skin crawl. As he turned to leave, Zara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She tried to shake off the unease, but it was clear to her now Tobi wasn't going to give up easily. Zara's heart raced as she watched Tobi walk away from the cafe. The encounter had left her shaken, but she did her best to maintain her composure. It wasn't the first time she had been confronted by someone from her past. But there was something about Tobi's persistence that felt different. He wasn't just reaching out for casual conversation, it was as though he was playing a game, a dangerous one. At that afternoon, Zara found herself lost in thought. Her phone buzzed again, the screen flashing with a new message from Tobi. She stared at it for a moment, her fingers hovering over the screen as she tried to figure out how to respond. "I saw you at the cafe. I can't stop thinking about you. I know we're meant to be together, Zara. Why are you fighting this?" The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Why was he fighting so hard? What was it about her that he couldn't let go of? Her relationship with Tobi had ended a long time ago. And she had never been interested in rekindling it. So why was he so determined to make her feel like she was the one holding them back? Zara had always prided herself on her independence. She wasn't one to be easily swayed by anyone, least of all someone with such an intense, almost obsessive energy. Yet, here she was, caught in the web of his persistence. The more she ignored his messages, the more forceful and relentless his attempts became. It was as if he was trying to force her into a corner, making it impossible to escape. She decided to confront him, to put an end to this once and for all. That evening, she agreed to meet him at a cafe in a quiet part of town. Her decision wasn't made lightly. She knew that Tobi's unpredictability could lead to anything, but the thought of him lurking in the shadows of her life, always pushing, always trying to manipulate the situation, left her with little choice. When she arrived, Tobi was already sitting at a table in the corner, a drink in hand. His eyes lit up when he saw her, as though he had won some small victory in getting her to show up. Zara fought the urge to roll her eyes. She had no intention of letting him get the better of her. "Zara," he said, his voice low, almost coaxing. "I'm glad you came. I've been thinking about us, about how everything we've been through. It wasn't just coincidence. We belong together. I know you feel it too." She took a deep breath, her gaze steady as she locked eyes with him. "Tobi, this has to stop. I'm not interested in getting back together with you, and I'm not going to entertain any more of these games. You need to respect my boundaries." Tobi's smile faltered for a moment, but it quickly returned, albeit with a more calculating edge. "You don't get it, Zara. This isn't a game. I'm just being honest with you. You're the one who's running away. Zara's pulse quickened. There was something about the way he said it. Something that didn't sit right with her. This wasn't about rekindling a romance, it felt more like a battle of wills, and Tobi wasn't about to lose. As the conversation continued, Zara realized she was no longer talking to the Tobi she had known. This wasn't the boy she had once shared moments with, this was someone desperate to bend reality to his will, someone who wouldn't stop until he had control. She stood up abruptly, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm leaving, Tobi. This conversation is over. Tobi didn't follow her this time. He didn't need to. The damage had already been done. Zara had barely made it to her car when she felt the sting of an ominous unease settle in her chest. Tobi's words, his insistent gaze, and the way he had looked at her, like he was waiting for her to fall into his plans, haunted her. She had dismissed the encounter, convinced that putting distance between them would solve everything. But now, as she gripped the steering wheel and drove through the quiet streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to escalate. That night, the unsettling feeling only grew. She couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, her mind racing. Had she handled it wrong? Should she have been more firm with Tobi? The last thing she wanted was for him to think she was playing hard to get. But there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of obsession that told her he wasn't someone to be ignored. The next morning, Zara woke up to an unusual notification on her phone. It wasn't a message, but a picture. The image was of her standing by her car outside her apartment complex the previous night. Her first thought was that someone had taken the picture from a distance, perhaps a random passerby. But as her eyes scanned the background, the realization hit her like a slap in the face. The shot had been taken from across the street, too close to be a coincidence. Someone had been watching her. The message that accompanied the photo was chilling. I see you, Zara. You can't hide from me. Zara's heart raced, her fingers trembling as she stared at the words. It wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't just Tobi trying to get her attention anymore. This felt different, dangerous. The weight of the message settled in her stomach like a lead ball. How had he known where she lived? How had he known she had been out that late? Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of it. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Tobi wasn't just persistent, he was crossing boundaries. This wasn't the behavior of someone who had simply misunderstood her intentions. This was a warning. Shaken, she immediately blocked his number, hoping to cut off all communication. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. The kind of obsession she was dealing with didn't just fade away because of a block on a phone. She couldn't just erase him from her life. As the day wore on, Zara tried to go about her routine, but the feeling of being watched was suffocating. She checked the locks on her doors, peered through the blinds every time a car passed by, and even considered changing her phone number. The constant paranoia gnawed at her, and every small sound or movement felt like a sign that Tobi was getting closer. The first warning had come, but Zara had a sinking feeling it wouldn't be the last. She couldn't escape him, not yet. Zara's days were starting to blend together, each one feeling more suffocating than the last. After blocking Tobi's number, she thought she could finally breathe easy. But the sense of dread that lingered around her was far from over. It was as if Tobi had become a shadow, creeping into the corners of her life, always present, always watching. Then, one afternoon, Zara received another unexpected message. She hesitated for a moment before opening it, bracing herself for whatever was coming next. The message read, I'm sorry, Zara. I really am. But you don't understand. I can't move on from Aisha without you. It's like I'm stuck in the past. I need your help to heal. Only you can help me move forward. Please don't shut me out. Zara stared at the screen, disbelief washing over her. Tobi had crossed a line. He wasn't just manipulating the situation anymore, he was playing with her emotions, trying to make her feel guilty for rejecting him. How dare he twist the truth like that? It wasn't her responsibility to fix him, especially not when his obsession was becoming more evident with every passing day. Her hands shook as she typed a response, "Tobi, you need to move on. This isn't healthy. I can't help you, and I don't want to be part of your healing process. Please leave me alone." She hit send and immediately regretted it. Would this finally make him stop? Or would it only push him further into his delusion? Later that day, Zara went to meet a friend for coffee. She needed to escape the constant weight of her thoughts. As she entered the cafe, she spotted her friend, Aisha, sitting by the window. But as she made her way over, her eyes caught something that made her freeze. At a table in the corner of the cafe sat Tobi. He wasn't looking directly at her, but he was watching, studying her every move. The sudden realization made her heart race. How had he known she was here? Had he followed her? She felt a chill run down her spine. But she quickly tried to mask her discomfort. "Zara?" Ayatun called, snapping her back to the present. "Yeah, sorry, I was just." Zara trailed off, her thoughts still on Tobi. The rest of the conversation felt surreal. Her mind kept drifting back to the sight of him, how effortlessly he had appeared in the same place she was. It was as if he knew exactly where to find her, as if he had been tracking her every move. Was it possible? Had he been following her all along? Later that evening, the strange occurrences continued. Zara came home to find a small bouquet of flowers on her doorstep, an anonymous gift. She checked the card, but there was nothing written on it, just a simple heart. It was a clear attempt to soften her, to pull her back into his web. The gesture only made her more uneasy. It dawned on her that Tobi had somehow found a way into her life without her even realizing it. Whether it was through mutual friends, social media, or sheer persistence, he was always one step ahead. It wasn't just that he was obsessed with her, he was orchestrating situations, manipulating them to make her feel guilty, and cornering her into a place where she might start questioning her own decisions. But Zara wasn't ready to give up just yet. She wasn't going to let him win. She just needed to figure out how to get him out of her life once and for all. But as the days passed, it became clear, Tobi's obsession wasn't something that would fade easily. He had crossed a line, and Zara knew she was now part of a dangerous game, one where the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. Zara had had enough. Each day felt like a constant battle, an uphill climb with no end in sight. The strange occurrences were starting to pile up, Tobi's insistence on reaching out, the flowers, the unsolicited messages. But this time, she refused to let her fear paralyze her. It was time to dig deeper, to uncover the truth about the man who was making her life hell. The first thing she did was go through her social media accounts. Tobi had always been active online, often posting pictures from his travels or vague philosophical quotes. His accounts were surprisingly open for someone with so many secrets. It wasn't long before she came across something that raised her suspicion, an old post on a mutual friend's page, a picture of Tobi with Aisha. The image had been taken during happier times, a moment frozen in time. But as Zara read through the comments, something stood out. One of Aisha's friends had written, "You never should have let him go, girl. He's obsessed with you. He doesn't let things go easily." Zara's breath caught in her throat. She clicked on the comment, trying to track the friend's profile, but she had already deleted her account. It didn't matter. The message was clear: Tobi's obsession wasn't just about her. Aisha, too, had been caught in his web. And now Zara was next. She spent hours going through his past relationships, tracing the breadcrumbs of his obsessive behavior. In every story, there was a common thread: Tobi had fixated on people he couldn't have. Whether it was a former lover or someone who had rejected him, Tobi seemed to latch on to the unattainable. A series of broken relationships littered the landscape of his past. None of them had ended on amicable terms. There were stories of ex-girlfriends who had moved away, changed their numbers, or even relocated cities to escape him. Every woman seemed to have a similar tale of desperation, feeling trapped by his incessant calls and messages. The more she dug, the more Zara began to understand, Tobi wasn't just a guy who had trouble letting go. He was a man with a dangerous fixation, and it was only a matter of time before she became another chapter in his twisted story. The truth was crashing down on her, but the hardest part was yet to come. Determined to confront him, Zara sent a message, "Tobi, we need to talk. This has gone too far. I know about your past. You need to leave me alone." It didn't take long for him to reply, and when he did, Zara could feel the manipulation oozing from every word. "Zara, I don't know why you're making this into something it's not. I've never done anything like what you're suggesting. You're overreacting. Why can't you just trust me? I thought we had something special. I'm just trying to find closure from my past, but you're pushing me away. This is why I've been distant, because you don't understand." Zara's head spun. She read the message again. Was she overreacting? Had she misunderstood the entire situation? The sudden shift in his tone, from guilt-ridden to defensive, left her questioning her own perceptions. The words he used, the way he blamed her for his behavior, it was classic gaslighting. She had seen it before in articles, in the stories of women who were manipulated into questioning their own sanity. It was working. For a moment, Zara felt the doubt creep in. Maybe she was misjudging him. Maybe she was the one who had pushed him too far, but deep down, she knew the truth. Tobi wasn't just a man looking for closure, he was a man who couldn't let go of control. And as much as he tried to convince her otherwise, Zara wasn't falling for it. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about her rejecting him. This was about his need to dominate, to manipulate, and to break down anyone who tried to stand up to him. And Zara? She was next on his list. Zara's mind was a whirlwind of questions. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but they didn't form the picture she had imagined. After digging through Tobi's past and confronting him, Zara felt a sense of urgency, like the walls around her were closing in. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something deeper, more sinister was going on. As the days passed, Zara continued to feel the weight of Tobi's presence in her life, even though she had cut off all contact. He still found ways to infiltrate her world, through mutual friends, social media, or the lingering reminders of his obsession. It was only when Zara's phone buzzed late one evening that she knew something important was about to happen. The message came from Aisha. "Zara, we need to talk. You don't know the full story about Tobi. I've been meaning to tell you for a while, but I wasn't sure how." Zara's stomach dropped. Aisha. The woman who had been Tobi's ex and the one who had been caught in his manipulative games long before Zara had even entered the picture. Zara had always known Aisha had her own issues with Tobi, but she had never understood the full extent of it. There had always been a distance between them, but now Aisha was reaching out. It was time to listen. They met the following evening at a quiet cafe. Zara tried to remain calm, her nerves tingling with anticipation. Aisha was already seated when she arrived, her posture tense, eyes looking over her shoulder as though she expected Tobi to walk through the door at any moment. "What's going on, Aisha? You said you needed to tell me something," Zara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Aisha took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting with the cup in front of her. "Zara, I don't know how else to say this, but Tobi is dangerous. He's not who you think he is. You might be the next one he targets, and I need you to be aware." Zara blinked, stunned. She had always felt that Tobi was strange, persistent even, but dangerous. The words felt foreign coming from Aisha, but Zara couldn't shake the sense of unease growing in her chest. "He stalked me, Zara," Aisha continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "For years, even before we broke up. I thought I could handle him, that I could control the situation, but I was wrong. I didn't realize how deep his obsession went until it was too late. He knew everything about me, where I went, who I was with. He showed up places uninvited, even when I asked him to stop. I tried to break things off, but it only made things worse." Zara's heart began to race. She had always assumed that Tobi's behavior was simply that of a man who had trouble letting go, but hearing Aisha's words made it clear, this wasn't a simple case of unrequited love. This was a man with a dangerous fixation, someone who couldn't handle rejection, someone who would go to extreme lengths to maintain control. Tobi had been stalking Aisha for years. How had she never known? I should have told you earlier, but I didn't want to scare you, Aisha said, her voice trembling now. But I see the signs in you, Zara. I see the same things I ignored in myself. Please, be careful. Don't let him manipulate you like he did to me. Don't think that his affection is love, it's control, and it'll destroy you if you let it. Zara's mind was spinning. Every word Aisha spoke felt like a revelation, and the more she listened, the more her trust in Aisha began to waver. How had Aisha known all along but never warned her sooner? Was there something she wasn't telling Zara? Her mind was racing, but the most important truth of all was clear: she had to get out before it was too late. As Zara left the cafe that night, her thoughts were heavy. Tobi's obsession wasn't just a threat to her, he had already destroyed someone else's life. Now, it was her turn to break free before she became another victim. Zara had always prided herself on her ability to keep control. She was a driven, ambitious woman, always focused on her career, and she had learned to navigate the complexities of life with a sharp mind. But now, it felt like everything she had worked for was slipping through her fingers. Tobi's manipulations had escalated in a way that Zara could no longer ignore. Every attempt to distance herself from him only seemed to push him further into the shadows, where he plotted his next move. And now, he was threatening the one thing she cared most about, her career. It started with a message. Zara had been preparing for an important meeting at work when she received a text from an unknown number. The message was simple, yet it chilled her to the bone. You don't want to find out what happens if you keep rejecting me, Zara. I can ruin your career in a heartbeat. Just think about it. I have connections. At first, she thought it might have been a prank, or perhaps even a desperate attempt to scare her. But the more she thought about it, the more the words settled in her stomach like a lead weight. Tobi had always been persistent, but this felt different, darker, more calculated. She could almost hear the malicious tone in his voice. Her fears were confirmed when she overheard a conversation between two colleagues at work. They were talking about an incident that had occurred recently. One that had nothing to do with her but was somehow connected to her name. The rumor mill had been churning, and somehow, Tobi had managed to spread lies about their relationship, lies that painted her as unprofessional, manipulative, and even desperate. Zara's pulse quickened as she realized what was happening. Tobi had been spreading false rumors about her, twisting the truth to suit his narrative. It wasn't just about rejection anymore, it was about ruining her reputation, destroying everything she had built. That night, Zara lay awake in her apartment, unable to shake the weight of the day's events. Her mind raced, replaying the conversations, the messages, the threats. But something else was nagging at her, the nagging sense that she wasn't alone. The silence in her apartment was deafening, and as the hours dragged on, she could have sworn she heard faint noises coming from the hallway. At first, it was just a rustle, like someone brushing against the walls, but then it became more distinct, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, like someone was walking back and forth outside her door. Zara's heart raced, and her thoughts went into overdrive. Was it just her imagination? Or was someone actually out there? Her body tensed as she carefully moved toward the door. Listening intently. She could hear it again, the soft sound of footsteps, as though someone was pacing, waiting for her to make a move. Fear gripped her chest. Was this Tobi? Had he followed her home? The thought was terrifying, and for the first time in weeks, Zara felt completely powerless. She knew she had to do something, but what? She couldn't live in constant fear, couldn't let him continue to control her life from the shadows. With a trembling hand, Zara grabbed her phone, dialing her best friend. No answer. She called again, her panic rising with each unanswered ring. There was no one to help her. She was alone. Alone in her apartment, with the sounds of Tobi's obsession closing in. The door handle rattled suddenly, as though someone had tried to turn it from the other side. Zara froze, her heart in her throat. She pressed her back against the wall, the phone still in her hand. Was it really him? Or was she just losing her mind? The noises stopped abruptly, and silence flooded the room. But the fear remained. Tobi's obsession had reached a new height, and Zara knew she had crossed a line. She was no longer just a woman rejecting a man, she was the target of someone willing to destroy everything in his path. And as the minutes dragged on, Zara realized that the danger was no longer just a threat, it was real. Zara's life had transformed into something unrecognizable. The once comforting hum of routine had been replaced by constant anxiety and the chilling feeling of being watched. The safety she had once felt within her own walls was now a distant memory. She knew she had to take action, she couldn't live in fear anymore. The first step was cutting ties with Tobi completely. She changed her phone number, blocking him from every possible way of reaching her. His social media accounts were all blocked as well. It wasn't enough to just avoid him in person, she had to erase him from her digital presence too. Zara thought that with these changes, she could finally regain some control over her life, but it wasn't that easy. At first, she felt a small sense of relief, as though a weight had been lifted. She moved into a new apartment, choosing a building that offered more security. Her new neighbors were friendly, and the neighborhood seemed peaceful. But the silence was deceptive. It wasn't long before Zara began to sense that the safety she'd sought was nothing more than an illusion. Tobi's presence loomed over her, even when she couldn't see him. One morning, as Zara opened her mailbox, she found an envelope addressed to her. There was no return address, and the handwriting on the front was unfamiliar. Her heart skipped a beat as she tore it open, only to find a single sheet of paper inside, folded neatly. The letter was short, but its message was chilling. You can't hide from me, Zara. I know where you live. I know what you do. Don't think you can escape this. Zara's breath caught in her throat. The handwriting was unnervingly familiar, but it wasn't just the words that sent a wave of dread over her. It was the details in the letter, details that only someone who had been watching her could know. The mention of her new apartment. The reference to a dinner she had just had with a colleague the night before. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone, not even her closest friends. For days, Zara kept a tight grip on her emotions. She tried to convince herself it was a coincidence. But then the letters started coming more frequently. Each one contained more intimate details about her life, what she wore to work, what time she left her apartment in the morning, where she had been spotted the previous weekend. Tobi was still there, lurking in the shadows, keeping track of every movement, every step she took. The paranoia was becoming unbearable. She couldn't go anywhere without feeling like someone was watching her. Zara took extra precautions, always checking her surroundings before leaving the apartment. Even avoiding certain places she had once frequented. But no matter how many measures she took, Tobi found new ways to make his presence known. She couldn't shake the feeling that Tobi was closer than ever, closing in on her like a predator in the night. The walls of her life were crumbling, and no matter how much she fought to protect herself, it seemed like she was losing the battle. Zara was trapped in a silent war, and it was a war she couldn't fight alone. She needed help. But she also knew the truth. Tobi had made it clear that no one, not even her, could escape his obsession. And that knowledge left her more vulnerable than ever. Zara sat in the dimly lit coffee shop, nervously tapping her fingers on the edge of her cup. She had taken the next step, the one she had been dreading, reaching out to a private investigator. The fear of the unknown had been consuming her, but she knew she couldn't fight Tobi alone any longer. Something had to give, and if the truth was the key to stopping him, then so be it. Her thoughts were interrupted when the investigator, a sharp-eyed man named Derek, slid into the seat across from her. His calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her, but his presence made her feel a small sense of relief. He had been the one person she could trust with the mess her life had become. I've looked into him, Zara, Derek said, his voice low but steady. I did a thorough check on Tobi. What you're dealing with is much worse than you think. Zara leaned in, her heart pounding. What do you mean? Derek hesitated, then handed her a folder filled with printed documents and photographs. As Zara flipped through the pages, she felt her breath catch in her throat. The evidence was damning. Tobi's past was a trail of broken relationships, many of them with women who had described eerily similar experiences. He had a pattern of obsession, manipulation, and forced attachments. Each woman had shared stories of relentless stalking, of Tobi pushing them to the brink, using guilt, charm, and threats to get what he wanted. No one seemed to escape unscathed, but the most chilling detail came from an ex-girlfriend who had spoken out to the investigator. She had described how Tobi had infiltrated every aspect of her life, how he had planted himself in her world and convinced her that she needed him. She recounted how, when she tried to break free, Tobi threatened to destroy her personal and professional life. He had been following her every move, much like what Zara was experiencing now. Tobi has done this before, Derek continued, his voice grim. He has a pattern. And it's getting worse. What you're experiencing isn't just about rejection. It's a dangerous fixation. He's not letting go easily. Zara's hands trembled as she absorbed the truth. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Tobi wasn't just a man who couldn't take no for an answer. He was someone with a deep-seated need for control, someone who used his charm and manipulation to entrap women, leaving them unable to escape. But just as quickly as the revelation hit, a fresh wave of terror swept over her. Zara knew she couldn't go back now. She couldn't undo what had been done. Tobi was watching, always. Watching. She had no doubt that he knew she had reached out for help. As Zara sat there, holding the folder, her mind raced. She had hoped for answers, but now the weight of her situation felt even heavier. The sense of being trapped intensified. No matter where she went, no matter how many precautions she took, she couldn't escape him. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. I know what you're up to, Zara. There's no way out. Zara's blood ran cold as she looked around the coffee shop. The walls felt like they were closing in on her. She was being hunted, and no one seemed to believe the full severity of her situation. Even if she screamed for help, who would listen? Tobi had already won. In one sense, he had instilled the kind of fear that kept her silent, kept her isolated. The silent war continued. And Zara was losing. Thank you for watching this episode. Zara's journey has only just begun, and the stakes are getting higher. What will happen next in this chilling story of manipulation and obsession? Stay tuned for the next episode to uncover more twists and suspenseful revelations. Have you ever encountered someone like Tobi, who refused to take no for an answer and used manipulation to control a situation? We'd love to hear your story. Share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about the importance of setting boundaries and standing strong against toxic behavior. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next thrilling episode.